Welcome to THORsday Comics. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design. Today we're talking about Journey into Mystery, number 95, starring Mighty Thor. You have finally met the one enemy you can never defeat, Thor. You have met a far more powerful duplicate of yourself. So we have Thor versus a Thor with two hammers, making him doubly formidable. Now you have a cover like this, drawn by Jack Kirby, which is a springboard for the story inside. With this springboard, the story could literally go anywhere. It could be any story, and it does go anywhere. I don't think you could have predicted what the interior story is based on this cover. They went with a very idiosyncratic approach. The story plot is credited to Stan Lee, the script to R. Burns, the art to Joe Sinnott, and the lettering to S. Rosen. So, another issue where there's no Kirby on the interior. So on this splash, we have so far the longest handle on Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. We have the longest handle that I've ever seen on Thor's hammer. The head of the hammer is sort of flattened and elongated. So I feel like we're still in this sort of prehistoric era of Thor, where other Marvel comics that Jack Kirby is working on at the same time are, fully fledged Marvel comics. They've adopted, all the hallmarks we associate with a Marvel comic, but with Jack Kirby away, Thor has not gotten there yet. The Radioactive Man story was the closest. That was pretty close to a full-fledged Marvel comic when Jack Kirby came back for that brief issue, and then when he left again, we take 10 steps back. But I feel like we will fully be in. Thor will have fully become a Marvel comic once his hammer becomes the dimensions we associate with his hammer. That's my guess, is that when his hammer handle gets down to normal size, it's going to be prime time Thor. So for now, we have these very nonsensical DC-style Superman stories for Thor. This one, the mighty Thor faces the demon duplicator. There they are, hovering in the air. Thor is literally hovering. He's not in any kind of pose you'd associate with superhero flight. If it wasn't for this background, you would think he was just standing on solid ground. And then we have, Thor meeting with Odin. Jack Kirby drew Odin in this sort of seated pose, 10 issues ago. And Joe Sinnott's just sort of copied that pose. This time he at least flipped it around. Usually Odin's over here, but it's the same pose. One of the things we associate with Thor is anytime Odin shows up, he looks completely different. He's got a completely different costume, and that's all Kirby. Kirby is all about constant invention and innovation and a sort of restlessness. Like, it's harder for him to keep emulating the same thing over and over than it is to just keep creating new and wonderful designs. He was definitely worth his weight in gold. Odin tells Thor there's a drought in Asgard. Thor gives his hammer the double tap. It rains, and now the crop yield will be much better in Asgard, and he's had his adventure. Now he goes back to Earth. Heimdall waves goodbye to him as he passes, and he's just in time to participate in a demonstration of an android that Dr. Don Blake has created. Dr. Don Blake, because he's one of the top physicians, understands the human body to such a degree that he can create artificial life, and he does. And that kind of threw me. I thought, Don Blake was never. I never got the impression that he was any kind of like super scientist or whatever. But then I thought, like why not? It's the Marvel Universe. Like, what's so special about Reed Richards? He's a scientist. What's so special about Peter Parker? He's a kid scientist, and he creates this incredibly innovative super adhesive and this amazing delivery system that can weave it into a mini web. So why not Don Blake? I mean, this thread wasn't really picked up on as the series matures, but he's as entitled to be a comic book super genius as anybody, and especially since he has the intellect of a god, the intellect of one of the dimmer bulbs of the gods, but still the intellect of a god. This green android that Don Blake has created is giving a demonstration of what he can do, and he's solving complicated math equations. Many of these non-Kirby stories I've just never read before. This is my first time. And so when I was sort of flipping through the book and saw this guy, I thought this was a bad drawing of Kirby's radioactive man. I didn't realize that this was an entirely separate green character. So then they give a demonstration of just how tough this robot is, this android. And so Thor hits him with his hammer, hits him on the head with the hammer, and he's just fine. The android informs him that someone must have turned all his dials at once, and now he's about to explode. So Thor wraps him up with metal, throws him into the air attached to his hammer, where he explodes harmlessly and comes back. He comes back home and finds Dr. Zaxton, who's the guy who's helping with the demonstration since Don Blake can't be there. He was the one who adjusted the dials the wrong way, assumed to be an accident. So now Don Blake gets back to his office. Zaxton is there. Zaxton. Buxton. He shows him his new invention. Dr. Blake, you're not the only super genius in the Marvel Universe. He shows him his invention. It's this duplicator. Creates multiple duplicates of his typewriter, just looking at what's around in the office at Marvel. And then he explains to Thor that he deliberately sabotaged his android because he was jealous, and he wants his duplicator to be the ultimate invention, not Don Blake's android. And he explains to him that he's also kidnapped Jane Foster and is holding her hostage, and in exchange, he'll release her if Don Blake helps him develop his duplicator so that it can duplicate life. It can duplicate living things. And so Don Blake agrees. He helps him, and now the duplicator can duplicate life. And the first thing he duplicates is a black cat. This made me wonder if Christopher Nolan has ever read this comic, or if the Wachowskis have ever read it. So we have a black cat that gets duplicated. It reminds me of The Prestige. Watch that movie if you haven't. And it reminds me of The Matrix, of course, with the glitch in The Matrix with the multiple black cats. But this is like a 1-for-1 of The Prestige. I was going to say maybe Christopher Priest has read this comic. It's a different Christopher Priest than the Christopher Priest, the novelist, is different from the Christopher Priest that has written for Marvel. Two different guys. And then Thor shows up. Don Blake imagines throttling Zaxton, but he remembers he's taken a pledge to never harm a human being unless in immediate self-defense. Zaxton duplicates Thor, and what he did not tell Don Blake is that he put a little kink into the duplicator so that if it can duplicate a living thing exactly, but it inverts their morality. It inverts their personality. So this new Thor is an exact duplicate of Thor, but he's evil. And Zaxton duplicates Thor's hammer with his device. So now Thor has to fight a Thor with two hammers. It's like Darth Maul with his double lightsaber. I wonder if you can put the handles of those two hammers together and make a super hammer. I'll have to save that for whenever I work on Marvel's Thor. That's not an announcement. Just you never know. Maybe one day I'll get to work on Marvel's Thor. They have a fight. Thor strikes the duplicate with lightning, and now there's another Thor, a duplicate of the duplicate, and then we get some other Christopher Nolan flourishes. This reminds me of Inception. He starts to make sort of this continuous duplicate of this airplane. You just have these multiple airplanes receding into the distance. The story takes a lot of leaps of logic. It's got incredibly silly logic that again you'd associate with a DC comic of the time, not a Marvel comic. And there's something about, Thor, whosoever is worthy, that these duplicates of Mjolnir aren't as good as the real thing. I think I've actually explained it better than the comic does. I still don't quite get it. And then Zaxton makes a copy of himself, and Thor starts flying towards him, and then Zaxton trips, and as he trips, the duplicator's destroyed. Zaxton dies. Thor's not able to get there in time. Although I feel like if this guy wasn't such a piece of shit, Thor would have given that little extra oomph to get there and save him. And so all that's left is an exact duplicate of Zaxton, who is exactly like him except nice. So we've sort of improved the universe a little bit. We lose one piece of shit Zaxton, and we get one super nice Zaxton. And then just in case you thought him kidnapping Jane Foster was a bluff, we see she really is in danger. Might have been nice to see that earlier in the story, just to sort of set up the stakes. But yeah, Thor comes and rescues Jane Foster from this dungeon she's being held in. Thor, comes back to Asgard, and Odin gives him a very mild admonishment, saying, "Oh, I thought you'd forgotten about us," because all this time, that magic rain that Thor had started has been going on. So he had to come back to Asgard to tap his hammer 3 times to make the rain stop. "Ah, good, you've ended the rainfall. For a while I thought you'd forgotten us, Thor." "Forget Asgard? Never, my father. For no matter what adventures may summon me to the world below, this is the land my heart calls home." Jack Kirby, come back soon. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. I'll see you next THORsday.